Hey there, this is Bram Kanstein, and you're listening to Bitcoin for Millennials. In this episode, I'm joined by Scott Lindberg. He's a freedom-focused entrepreneur and a champion for decentralized education and parenting. And in this episode, we discuss how you can take control of your child's education to prepare them for an AI future. We examine the current system flaws, how you can build your own decentralized education stack, and how to raise sovereign kids in an increasingly exponential world where AI is coming at us at a faster pace than ever before. I thought this was a fascinating conversation, and I learned a lot, and I hope that you will too. Now let's dive in. We've been in touch before. I think it's really interesting what you were doing, and I think for me, it's this conversation is great timing. Like I'm right in the middle of figuring out, how to take more control of my own child's education. And I can imagine, many listeners have children in school, and it's kind of because. My son is very gifted and he doesn't really fit in the traditional school system. So we are considering homeschooling, but also looking into like dedicated gifted education. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that you talk a lot about self-custody parenting. Of course, that's a nice alignment with Bitcoin self-custody, but also, the separation of education and state. And I thought it would be interesting to, kind of start to go through your journey of when you got interested into all of this, but also what it means for you right now in 2025.
So we started homeschooling before Bitcoin was a thing. My wife and I had met at Yale when we were in business school, and she was going to be an investment banker, and I was supposed to go off and be a management consultant. That was the plan. And we're going to get a nanny, and someone was going to take care of the kid. After our first was born, she basically said, listen, I want to have the relationship with our daughter. I want to know her and have that experience. I want to stay home with her. And so it started out, that was the start. But where it led was she never wanted to let go. And we had discussion where if we could make it on one income and she could stay with our oldest, then we would make do with less vacations or whatever it took, as long as we could make it, that we were going to do that. And this led to homeschooling. Now, I had gone to public school, and she had as well. And our families reacted negatively to this. My parents took it as somehow the homeschooling decision was an indictment against what they had done with me. And Tali's Chinese, and the idea of giving up your career after you've gone to an Ivy League school seemed unthinkable. And so we had some initial family resistance, but it started with that relationship. Tali wanted to have the relationship with Brianna, and this led to homeschooling. And then once she did research on what was going on, even in preschool, she was pretty alarmed about they were holding some kids back. They didn't want them to learn to read too early because then they were going to be bored in the next grade type of thing. She had also heard firsthand from her, from some she knew, who was actually, she was older and she was actually a nanny, saying how when the real mom went to work, the kid would call her mom. And Tali's like, there's no way I'm doing that. There's no way. And so then we just said, okay, the next step was let's just try it out. Let's see. The worst that could happen is it's too difficult, or we need a second income or something else, and then Brianna would go into school, and no big deal. You basically fast forward. Now we've had four kids. We had four kids within about a 5-year period, and she homeschooled them all the way through the K through 12 high school years. And our youngest is now 18 and done. And it's been an amazing journey. And one of the things that we learned, we didn't have the language then to describe what was going on. Like as you introduced the show talking about self-custody of parenting or the separation of education and state, we didn't have those words then. Those came because the last 4 or 5 years we've been studying Bitcoin, economics, and a lot of other types of things, and we just saw the relationship, the values between these two groups of people: those who want to self-custody parenting and education, and those that value freedom and self-custody their money. there's a lot of overlap with the themes. Freedom is probably the biggest one on that one. But that's where it started. And the language I use now, we're very passionate about not only helping teach our own kids, but we want to teach other people. So people like yourself who have younger kids or those who are thinking about that, we made a ton of mistakes and we didn't have the language. We don't have all the opportunities that you have now. You also have new challenges today that we didn't have because the state control and other things have only accelerated. So we're just trying to help others. We really enjoy the subject. We're very passionate about it, having gone through it, and we just want to share that with other people. It's amazingly fulfilling when you can help somebody else see and understand these types of ideas.
Can you remember like what made you and your wife also say like we're not outsourcing our kids' future anymore? Do you think there was a prerequisite to that? I mean, I'm running into this because my son just doesn't feel like he's in the right place, right? But I also was just following what I thought, everyone is doing. I think it's similar, with the money that we talk about in Bitcoin, of course. So, yeah, was there anything that kind of brought you to that point, or maybe like an own experience, or maybe something you saw with like other people? Is there something you can remember around that?
Tali would just experiment. So she really wanted the kids to excel. And what we found in the homeschooling world is you have some people there because maybe it's a religious reason and there's something being taught that they disagree with. There were somewhere there maybe because their kids had special needs and they needed more attention than the teacher could give. Her perspective was she wanted our kids to excel and she didn't want them to be held back for that. And so she just got creative and she would go, and if she couldn't teach Latin, that was fine. She could find some other programs, or maybe there's someone else can teach it. Maybe she doesn't know martial arts, but we can go someplace and they could do gymnastics or swimming or whatever physical activity. And so it's not this prescribed thing where I come to you and I say, if you do this, you have to follow these things. The idea that you need somebody else to tell you it reminds me of how the whole fiat system with money. The idea that somebody else needs to be there to tell you what to do, and it could be anything. It could be in education, it could be in medicine, it could be in our diets, it could be in all those things. With education, she just wanted to be creative. She wanted to, if she couldn't do it herself, then she had the capability, she had the agency to go and do what she wanted to do for our kids. And it's really unbelievable. I mean, technology should be deflationary. This comes up in Bitcoin circles frequently, and it's one of those things that I think you and I had talked about on it. But it goes way, way beyond the curriculum. Where that seems to be the most common place that people have questions. But you talk about critical thinking, teaching kids about creativity and critical thinking, and then the relationship with the child and the parent, which is also missing in our high type preference type of society. And once you start to see that, you'll never let go of it. You'll never let go of that. Now you might need help. So maybe your son is gifted in math and it gets beyond a level that you can do. So, okay. So between online resources and tutors, and maybe there's colleges in your area, there's clubs. I don't even know what they are. But once you realize and you see your kids start to excel, it's going to be like a drug. It's going to be a drug for you. I still think the most asymmetric upside of this whole thing is going to be that relationship that you have with your kids. And I didn't get that initially. I know that's what kind of kicked it off, but I didn't fully understand it until later. And now we have feedback from our kids that they've gone off and they've been around others, and they realize they just took it for granted that everybody could talk to their parents and they could have this relationship. You may not always agree, but you can have it. So I think I went sideways a little bit on where you wanted to go with that, but I don't remember a specific incident. It was more of a collection of these trial and errors. Let's try this, and then how did it go? well, we liked it. Let's do more of those. And then something would not work. And we say, well, we didn't like this co-op, or maybe the co-op was great and this program wasn't. And through trial and error, you get this collection of things that you find that are best for your kids. And that's it. Like you keep learning and keep learning and keep learning yourself how to be a better parent.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, so why compromise when you need liquidity? Meet Debify, the Bitcoin-backed lending platform made by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Debify connects you to institutional-grade liquidity and allows you to borrow fiat or stablecoins, all while keeping your Bitcoin 100% under your control with a non-custodial 3 out of 4 multi-sig escrow solution. Get competitive rates from a global marketplace of institutional-grade lenders with loan terms that you choose, from 1 month up to a year. There are no hidden fees and there is no rehypothecation, just pure Bitcoin-aligned lending with the highest level of transparency and security. Are you ready to unlock liquidity without ever selling a single sat? Go to debify.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to check out their current lending offers. That's debify.com/Bram. Yeah, and so what are kind of like the parallels that you see between fiat money, or maybe even the education about fiat money, and just in general education paid for by fiat money? I mean, I love that you mentioned critical thinking, and I had to think about, when I was studying, I was always the person that asked questions, and everyone always found me very annoying. Like, oh, there's Bram again with his question. But I always said, like, yeah, I'm actually interested, right? Like, I'm not just digesting what has been told to me. Like, I'm interested to learn more, or if I think something doesn't sound right, I'm asking questions to clarify. But I remember that there were lots of people that found that annoying. And I think now that I look back, for me, this is also part of kind of like the fiat money mindset. Is just like, okay, you do what everyone else is doing. You just sit there and you digest whatever has been sent to you, right? And you kind of like park that critical thinking part, which I'd say is probably very necessary for the outsourcing that they're trying to do, right? The fact that you parked it. But yeah, what are kind of like the parallels that you've discovered or seen?
So there's a lot. One of the biggest ones is troubles with trust. I had troubles trusting now authorities, and that's very different than I had grown up. It was, you should trust the teachers, you should trust the political leaders that say one thing, you should trust the people who give you dietary advice, whatever it is that you fill in the blank. And as you study Bitcoin and Austrian economics, and you realize how the incentives are leading to things that are not in your best interest. So I'll give you a personal example. So I was in the military. I started my career, graduated West Point, and I spent 5 years in the military. So I was this patriotic Midwest kid. And after studying Austrian economics, I had a very hard time with the concept that the money, that because you could just print and it wasn't backed by anything, was leading to unnecessary and endless wars. This was a huge problem I had. it took me a long time to reconcile this. One of the more recent ones in the last couple of years, last year, Tali's been going really deep. We've been going deep on the health and the food and the things that were advised to us from the government saying you should eat these certain things or whatever. And now you realize that's also corrupted. And you start to talk to Bitcoiners and you get into a carnivore diet and other types of things. So the biggest thing that I see is trust. If you as a parent are going to go through, first of all, the mom's going to go through the birthing process, right? You're going to physically have to go through something. You're the one that's going to stay up late at night trying to take care of your baby if she's sick. You're the one who's going to make all this investment with your love and your energy and your money and your time. That's you, the parent. That's your incentive aligned with the kid. The state is looking at the child more as an asset in some kind of social engineering type of thing. And there's administrators, there's politicians, there are unions, there are a lot of other players in there. And their incentives are not aligned with the child. So are you going to trust those other players to do what's right for your child? So the fundamental thing, there's a lot of similarities that we can talk about: decentralized education, separation of education and state, sound education. We can kind of go through a whole list of things. The FUD, there's a lot of FUD against self-custody of parenting. The fundamental principle is about freedom, and it's about the incentives. And if you don't trust somebody, then what are you going to do about it? So that's where you say, I'm going to take control of this. I'm going to custody, and I'm going to take responsibility for the parenting or the education, or however you want to call this thing that we're talking about. The biggest thing for me is not to trust, right, and to take action where you can. Then there's multiple layers we can get into in terms of peeling apart proof of work and decentralization and other types of things. But that's where I would start.
Yeah, I wrote some about that down, but maybe it's interesting to start at because what I found interesting on my journey with regards to, the money, I always say, why do you spend your finite time and energy to receive a reward that another person can just create infinitely, right? And this person maybe doesn't even do that in like a malicious way, but they definitely don't care about your individual life as much as you care about it, just factually. So even if they think they are doing something that is good, it still affects you and your individual life in a bad way, right? And
yes.
That kind of puts you in multiple ways, makes you outsource a lot of different things. For example, custody over your wealth, putting the money in the bank is actually lending out the money to the bank, right? That's not how it's sold to you. It's sold to you as custody, and you think, okay, that's great because I'm not able to do that. And what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that it's kind of the same with education, right? I know someone who's been a teacher for 8 years, and she told me that she had these parent-teacher conversations, right? Like the 10 minutes or 15 minutes that you have from time to time. And then she would tell parents oh, your child is lacking in reading, for example. And then the parents would get mad at her. And then she would ask, do you ever read with your child? And then the people said, no, I never do that, right? And so they even get into these types of conversations where people are expecting that the outsourcing is done to a degree that they could never, ever do, right? And so I feel that even with education and money, it's kind of in the same vein as okay, I'm outsourcing it, but I'm fully trusting it without actually, I'd say, getting receipts or something, why am I actually doing this, right? Is it something that are these other people with their own individual lives and their own urges and needs and wants and egos and all these things? Are they doing a better job at that than I could do? And yeah, maybe it's an interesting place to break it down where we start there. Why is this created? Who creates this? Who benefits from that?
Right.
You mentioned the players. What are they
Mhm.
optimizing for?
Okay, so there's a few things there. So if you're looking at it from the praxeology standpoint, the game theory standpoint, you definitely have different players and different incentives, and you go all the way back in history to like Calvin and Luther and what they wanted to do with in terms of religion, and then you get into the Prussians that created this. They wanted to have an education system to get the populace so that they could have people who would follow orders in the military. Right, it was a military type of thing. So you can trace this history all the way, all the way, all the way, all the way back. I would say you could also look at it in terms of similarities to the money side. This really accelerated in this last century as we were going towards central banks and the more fiat we became, there's a correlation with how much control that they want. Right, the state ultimately is going to want control, and the players involved are going to want to do things to benefit themselves. I'm not saying all teachers are bad and all administrators are bad. I do think there's plenty of people out there who think that they're doing the right thing. So when I say this in generalities, I'm not trying to offend anybody who's listening to this thing saying, hey, I'm a teacher, and I'm not saying that. But the system is set up to incentivize conformity and compliance. Right, that's what the state players are going to want, and anything that helps them with with more power in that regard, that's what they're going to do. Parents, you're going to be thinking about things like we were talking about, creativity and critical thinking and things like that. So there's a correlation there, and it also comes back to I don't even agree with the metrics. So let's make another comparison on how you even evaluate. How are we even talking about this? So if you're talking about money. In the fiat world, you might be talking what's gross domestic product, and somehow that includes government spending. Like it doesn't even make any sense, right? And you talk about CPI, well, this is a manipulated number, and then as you start to study the money, and you realize, well, what we really want is production, efficiency. We want a free market. That's valuable, not the government spending. And then you look at monetary inflation versus price inflation, and you start to distinguish. So apply that over to education. The reading levels is one thing. And even by their own metrics, reading and math levels, we haven't improved. So we're spending, I think it was in the neighborhood of $900 billion a year in the US for the education budget. So it was over $17,000 per child. Even using their own metrics of whether reading and math had improved, there was almost no change. In fact, I think in COVID it actually dropped. We're not measuring things. We're measuring standardized tests. That's more important to incentivize a teacher. They're going to be evaluated on how many of their kids pass, what grades do they get, and how they did on whatever these, like the reading, the math scores. Versus you as a parent, what do you think it is important to your child? Well, we talked about critical thinking. Well, there's also, how do you use, for example, artificial intelligence? How are you using technologies and learning how to learn? How about the morals? What are you teaching your kids about work ethic? What are you teaching about other types of things? What does a child really need to be successful today? It's a different set of things than these standardized tests. The standardized tests are not going to help you when you graduate, right? So, and the reading scores, if kids actually like to learn, they really do. And so they might come at different paces and things like this, but I don't even agree with the metrics that they're using. And when parents have those conversations, just the fact that you're using their language to define what is okay for your kid is already putting you in their bucket. You as a parent, you're going to be much more open-minded. My kid, these are the types of things I want to teach them about. How to deal with other people, responsibility, the idea of anti-fragility, the idea that failure is actually good because you can learn from it. There's a whole mess of other things that you can learn about. Plus, talk about food literacy, energy literacy, how to view technology, all these other types of things that you talk about, they're more valuable than the test scores. And it's funny too, even grades. I saw a chart on grade inflation, and it went back to I don't know, it was 40 or 50 years. And when they first started it, I think A's were 15% or something. And then each year it just keeps increasing. And now it's over 45%. And the number of C's went down. I actually thought it was pretty funny because they happened to cross over each other at about 1970, 1971. So it coincided pretty nicely with the Nixon shock. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But now the incentives, you go back to the incentives. Well, the teachers have less headaches if they give higher grades. They have less upset parents like the ones you're talking about, right? They have fewer of those conversations, and the kids feel better about themselves. But now you have these inflated grades, but you don't have any skills in the real world that correlate with what the grades were supposed to represent. So the metrics I don't even agree with the metrics. And so one of the similarities I see is who's defining the terms on what's successful? How are we evaluating whether or not someone is successful? You don't, unless you're doing something like if you're going to be a doctor, I would really like you to go to medical school. But we now require college degrees for everything. Like there's just the metrics of saying you need to have this and you need to have these scores to get into a good school and get this. The metrics are coming from someone who has a different point of view. And so I think the size of the government, the growing number of the bureaucracy that's around it, the number of players that are incentivized in there, it's very similar to the education system, and it's going to corrupt it in the same way it's corrupt any other type of industry, whether it's food or energy or otherwise. I would just say you gotta look at it from a first principle standpoint. As a parent, you should look at what is it that's going to help my kid be successful, and you've been doing it for millennium, so you also can compare. You asked about comparing money to education. The whole idea of the fourth turning, right? For millennia, parents didn't need a central authority to tell them how to teach their kids. Jefferson didn't need it. Washington didn't need it. Edison didn't need it. The Wright brothers didn't need it. You don't need a central authority to tell you what's good for your kids. Parents, you already have all the skills you need to do that. You don't need a central authority to approve you as a teacher or approve you as a parent or anything else. And this idea that we need somebody else to verify that we're okay, you don't. Historically, that hasn't been the case. My opinion is we're in the fourth turning, and that's the reason that you're seeing homeschooling in the U.S. with COVID. The numbers jumped from 2 million to almost 4 million homeschoolers because people had to, and then they saw what was really going on. So that momentum is going to continue, and I'm hopeful that in 5 or 10 years, you really get to a point where we can just completely revamp the education system and how we look at raising our kids in the same way that I'm very hopeful we'll do the same with money. And it's going to take a while before we get to that point, and it's going to be pretty volatile. But that's the path I think we're on. I think we're following a similar path to all these other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say like you don't need permission to be a parent, right? And that for millennia, people didn't need a centralized organization to help them, quote unquote. I have to think about a quote that I heard from a Bitcoiner that said, like, did you know that KYC, for example, is very new in finance, right? Like for thousands of years, people, did business without KYC, and now it's like all over the place, and you need to send your identity to some centralized point in order to give you permission to use some sort of financial service. I think it's a bit similar to that. And I like what you said about also the level of education and also the grades, right? I've also seen examples where too many children had lesser grades, and then the school just changed the way they grade so that there's more A's, like you said, right?
Yes.
And it's just wild because I think that is just a very basic thing, right? If you have 10 questions, you have 8 plus right, you get an A. If you have between 6 and 8 right, you get a B, right? Like it's just, that's very basic. Like that doesn't have to do anything with the content, right? But because, and I think that's why it's also interesting we're talking about education in the fiat money context. I just Googled, in my country, one of the richest countries in the world, the reading capabilities of Dutch students of 15 years is worsening. So in 2022, 1/3 of the children didn't get to the proper reading level for a 15-year-old. And I think it's even worse right now. And it also says, also in other countries, students are having like lower levels of reading. But when I see that, I think like reading is the basic level of education. That's like layer one
Yes.
of the rest of education, right?
Yes, it is.
So how in like what kind of environment would you allow whatever political environment, by the way, if you're left or right or center or whatever, I think many people would agree that reading is the base layer of education. How in the world can you have that level going backwards? Like how is that even possible?
Well, so here's the thing. I should have mentioned this up front, but the system as we see it now, where from a money system where there's more and more control, right? And we look at each other and we want to pull your hair out, saying, how can this be? How can they continue for us? How can they continue to spend money when we're clearly going off a cliff, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a train wreck, and they won't change. So from education, what we're seeing, where you're putting more and more of your resources, the kids' time, other people's time, the money, everything else, and you're getting worse results when we should be getting better results, especially with technology. It's intentional. The idea that you dumb people down, this is not an accident. The system is both for the money and for education. The system is getting exactly what it was designed to do. The system is designed. This is the way that this is. It's don't. I mean, we should. This is one of those things where, as you learn about it, you had trust issues. I go back to the trust issues. I trusted that the intent of the education system was truly to help prepare kids for the future, but that's not the results that we're getting. So we have the surprise, but it's designed for people to just conform. And by the way, if I can control your language and I can introduce propaganda in terms of different political thoughts, if I can do all of that and keep your reading level lower, I mean, you get people who are more compliant. Who's going to stand up and be a free people if they could actually talk to each other freely and they had the words and the capability and the courage to express opinions to each other? The people in power have much better chance of staying in power if people don't know how to communicate with each other, and you dampen all those things. So that's where I'm upset that that's where their system is, but I'm past the point of being surprised that the system is yielding this. It's getting exactly what it was intended to do. So
if you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want. Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read. And it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stamseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order. Do you think this is a specific problem then for the West also? I mean, my little pet peeve in education is when I see, these videos from like Chinese kindergarten where they do like some like rhythmic dance or like some a ball bouncing together, right? And there's like 5-year-olds who are like taking apart a car engine, or they're cooking for each other, right? Like there are certain. I mean, you can say a lot about China, obviously, right? But there is a certain. It seems to a degree there's a certain set of values behind that, right? Or at least there is a strategy. You can think of that strategy whatever you want. Do you think that's similar with the West, or maybe also compared to like rich Arab countries or whatever? Like, is this a specific like Western problem? Because I feel like this course is kind of like natural, right? Like same as with the money. It's just the quality is being devalued at an accelerated pace because the money is being devalued at an accelerated pace. So these are just the effects that we see until it blows up. People wake up and are like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I think that's what we're talking about in Bitcoin with money, and now in this conversation with education, right? Or people are just going to be totally domicile and be like, okay, yeah, just outsource my entire life into like some sort of communist society. I don't even know what that would look like, right? But yeah, it feels like this is the natural course of degrading money, and therefore also the parts of the society and education.
Yeah, so I agree with you that there is a difference. It's interesting. It's an interesting question. One thing that I thought about while you were asking that is, if money is a tool, right? Money is going to help us communicate value across time and space, and this is a basic idea that allows us to allocate our scarce resources in the world, and therefore we can develop new technologies. It's a very natural thing. But tools can be used for good or bad. So if you're in a collectivist society, like a communist country, and you have complete control over the money, the technology will take you to a CBDC, and you have total control. And the education can also go that way. With greater technology, you're going to be able to have better control. So if the government in China decided that they no longer wanted to promote engineering they're going to promote that because having those engineers helps them with their national security, right? They're not doing it from the standpoint of the individual. The benefit the West has, even if we're behind on like what the example is that you just gave with the math or the engineering or the food or whatever it was, is you can't stop the technology. Like, it's just unstoppable, and it's only accelerating. This is the whole Jeff Booth type of thing. And then people, they look at AI and they look at robotics, and they start to wonder about nanotechnology and quantum computing and these other things. So the technology is going to accelerate. And what the benefit we have in the West is, once people understand freedom, that idea is out there. So Bitcoin, a decentralized money, trustless, verifiable money, is out there. That concept is out there. I think it's going to continue to grow. But even if someone is listening to this and they think that we're wrong about that, fine. But the idea has spread, right? Then you take Nostr, the idea of you control your identity, that you can't be canceled if I want to follow you, that we have the ability to communicate. That idea is spreading. The idea of education, as it used to be, where the parent was the one responsible for it, and their incentives are aligned with the kid, this idea is spreading. This idea is spreading. And there are people like yourself who are looking at their child, and they're like, I'm going to do everything I can for you. I'll die for you. I will get you the resources you need. I will do anything for you. You're freedom-minded now. So the benefit that we have in the West is, I don't think that those ideas around freedom of education can be suppressed. You can try to slow it down, like you can slow down the technology. You can try to slow down the adoption of Bitcoin, but you can't stop them. I don't think you can stop those ideas. You might be able to slow them down. You may be able to suppress them in certain areas. And so over the very, very long term, yes, another country who has different culture might emphasize education in a different way, and they can maybe produce engineers faster, younger, whatever. But they will never be able to compete in the long run to a truly free, the true freedom of ideas. Because ideas are contagious and they build on each other, just like there's layers of technology to build the internet. There's layers of technology in Bitcoin. There are so many ways that this helps education, and now these ideas are spreading. So some ideas spread from Bitcoin, and they're mixing with Nostr, and then you talk about hole punch and the key technologies and things around peer-to-peer internet. Who knows where all that's going to go? And you throw in free and open source software from a technology that helped Bitcoin, and you look at free and open source education, and you say, okay, you got Sailor.org, Khan Academy, Wikipedia. Even if they're a little bit biased, it's still, the idea is out there. You combine that with the Nostr, I don't think you can contain that long term. I think you can slow it down, but the very, very long term, I think the ideas of freedom are going to win out, and they'll ultimately will they'll outperform. It's sort of like look at North South Korea or East West Germany on how the freedoms that the countries had, one would prosper more than the other. I think this is a different type of freedom. You and I are talking about education in this, but I think very, very long term, those ideas, you can't stop them. Now that they're out there and people have them and they're talking and they're in meetups and they're on, just the example of the fact that we're on a podcast. These ideas are out there. So you take this and now you post this on Nostr, even if YouTube or somebody else doesn't like what you say, now it's out there. And you can't stop other people from watching this. And then those parents talk to other parents, and I don't think you can stop it. So I'm optimistic. It may take a long time, but I'm very optimistic.
Yeah. All right. I think that's great. I think in general that is what we're seeing. Like people are realizing that and I think I'm a similar in that sense that and Bitcoin really taught me that. It just taught me to think for myself. So not necessarily that my idea of something is better, but more reflecting on, okay, am I okay with what I'm doing right now? Like is the thing that I'm outsourcing, am I okay with that? Do I even know why I'm outsourcing this, right? Do I have enough information in the context that we're talking about to send my child to this or this school? Like, am I okay with how they spend their day or what's being taught to them, right? So I think it's more about doing the work to actually have a substantiated agreement towards yourself to actually be okay with the decision you make, right? And I think that's why I looked up like the reading level, right? Like that's a receipt. And I think if I would look up like, is the education budget in my country is probably in nominal terms the highest that it's ever been in the entire history of my country, right? And if the receipt is 1/3 of 15-year-olds olds are not at the reading level, like I have to decide what I think about that, like what my judgment is on that receipt, basically, right? And I can ignore it, but I think it's kind of like, in general, I think people are more and more conscious. So once you get to a point like that, to an insight like that, it should trigger you in thinking like, okay, what do I actually think of that? Like this doesn't really make sense.
I 100% agree with you. If I could speak to the younger parents or those that are thinking about it, I think this was our first conversation. The potential upside is just unbelievable, and the downside is minimal. So it's asymmetric. Like it's just the potential upside of doing that, and it doesn't start with saying I already have the confidence to do this. I think that's a mistake. That you may not know how you're going to do it. You might be afraid of something. Whatever it is. And that's the point though, is you start with commitment. am I committed to do this? And then courage will follow from that. If you say, I'm going to do this, I might make mistakes, but I know in the long run this is worthwhile for us to pursue for all these reasons that we've gone through. Then eventually you're going to build your competence, because when I was trying to explain, like, where Talia would find one thing that worked or didn't work, and this is like a kid falling down and learning how to walk. You have to try it. So for the listener who has young children and is trying to understand which way to go, or someone, maybe it's a young couple and you're trying to decide to have kids or not, it's the best decision we ever made was to have a family. And the second best decision that we ever made was to homeschool. And that might take a different form depending on where you're at. But we committed to it, but we didn't know what we were doing. We made a ton of mistakes, but your kids you're going to learn from that. So if you're beating yourself up because you don't have confidence or something now, I would encourage you, start with commitment. And that the confidence will follow later after you've been through it and you've learned. And then when someone else asks you a question, you can say, yeah, my kid was excelling in math, and so here's what I did. So it's 3 or 4 years from now, and you're going to be able to give advice about what you personally did with your son, right? Well, you don't know today. You're just committed to try to figure it out. But in the future, you'll have that confidence. So I just want to be really encouraging to people who are in that early space, or if you know somebody's in that early space, it's worthwhile to make the commitment. And the fact that you don't have all the answers right now, that's okay. But just keep studying, keep learning, and try it. That would be my kind of my message to someone like yourself, saying, I get it. You don't have all the answers. You can ask me. I don't have all the answers, and certainly what worked for us may not work for you. But I think the investment, the proof of work that you're looking for, the receipts, you're going to see it years from now. And you can't go back in time and redo it. So do it now. Commit.
Yeah. So I think in Bitcoin, we talk a lot about, like, what's the opportunity cost of not moving away from the fiat money, right? And I think my summary of that would be that your insecurity, your future insecurity increases, right? Like your anxiety towards the future increases if you keep saving your economic energy or your wealth in something that's being devalued constantly. And you say, like, the payoff in changing the education or taking control of the education, that might take a few years. But are there any hidden opportunity costs you think parents face by trusting the current system and just not questioning it, like how we're talking about it now?
Two ways it does that. The one we've already covered, in that there's an opportunity cost in what's not being taught. They're going to teach standardized tests versus maybe a real life skill, like how to cook or exercise or something else. Time, though, I think it's worthwhile to just take a moment and talk about the opportunity costs and how time is, we call it fiat time. And so if you just walk through the day of an average student, they're going to get up at whatever time, and every person has their own clock of when they naturally wake up. And some people are nighttime, sometimes are early, and this can also change throughout your life. Maybe when you're young, you need to sleep a different amount of time, or you have your time of day is different. So we force everybody to start at a certain time. So you're already for most of the kids, you're probably working against their natural clock. Then you're gonna have this day that's set up with them that is, if you looked at it from a manufacturing standpoint or an operation standpoint, it is just filled with waste. You're going to spend time to get to the bus or to drive to school or however you get there. You're going to spend time in between classes. You're going to spend time to get back. The day is broken up in such a way that it really, really kills your time. The big killer is the next one, and that is you never allow the kids to get into flow. So if you have an hour-long class, and I don't know what classes are these days, but if you have an hour-long class, the teacher has 20, 30 kids there, and they're going to have to teach to the median student. So the super gifted are not going to get the attention. So they're going to lose their time when they could be studying at a faster pace. The slower end that need extra, they're not going to get the material for the opposite reason, that they need special help, right? So they're wasting their time in that hour. But if you happen to hit the right point and you get a kid into flow, then the bell rings and they got to break it off to go to the next thing. So you're breaking up their flow. And then the fourth level of opportunity cost is the calendar. At least here, I don't know Dutch calendar, but for here, we still have the system where you're going to take the summer off. So imagine you're going to the gym and you go every day and you have this compound effect of making little progress versus somebody else who says, I'm going to train for the marathon. I'm going to start a week before it, right? If you take time off, you're going to naturally have to make it up again. And it's true with what you're studying too. So if you're studying math and you get to a certain point, you take 2 or 3 months off, you're going to spend the next part of the next year just trying to get back to where you were and get a refresher, right? So you kind of have this versus if you are homeschooling or you have control over your kids' education, even if you're outsourcing it to private teachers or whatever you're doing, and you do that around the clock or around the calendar rather, you have less of that backward fall to make up. It's more like that steady exercise thing. So the opportunity costs with how we manage our time, the compound effects of doing that for 18 years, the first 18 years of a person's life, where the time is not aligned with the time of day. There's a ton of wasted time in between things as you wait between things, whatever they are, classes or to and from school. You never get into flow and it's broken, and then your calendar breaks up too. You have all those things working against you. Versus you take control of the parenting and you say, maybe you let your kids sleep in because that works for them and they start later, or vice versa. Maybe they get up really early and go to bed early, whatever it is. They're not wasting their time going back and forth. If you get into flow and you need 3 hours because you are just mad, you're just into flow with your calculus or whatever it is, let them go with that and then take a natural break. And you do that year round, then your potential to learn is just magnified. Like the compound effect of doing the things in the right order, you're intellectually are going to just let your kids prosper and get closer to their potential. The opportunity cost of putting everybody into these things and saying, you're going to conform to this time frame and study these certain things at these certain times, and you're going to move from here to here to here. It has so many second and third order consequences that are detrimental to the student. It's not just the subject that they're talking about. So the time opportunity cost it's harder to see that. It's almost like what was that, like the broken window, the Henry Hazlitt thing? It's hard to see the unseen. It's hard to see all the unseen damage that's done with how we manage time in fiat education. And as a parent, you have the flexibility to try what works for your kid and adjust to maximize it for them.
You mentioned something that made me think of something I heard you or something I read from you before, where you compared homeschooling to Bitcoin mining.
Yes.
I think the time and energy part, what you just mentioned, kind of weaves into that. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, right. So if you're mining Bitcoin, well, first of all, it's decentralized, right? Anybody can mine. It's permissionless. Anybody can do it. But you have to decide what to do with your energy. And is it worth it to buy the equipment, pay for the energy, and run that? And if you decide to fork it and you want to do your own Bitcoin and nobody else accepts your coins, you lost your energy that you put into it. So your decision on how to use your precious resources is critical in that. But the result would be, your proof of work would be, I decided, well, I got the right equipment. I found some energy that was cheaper than other people, and I find more blocks and I get more Bitcoin, right? That's the proof of work you get. education, you're decentralized. You're in a family unit, most likely. Maybe you're in a co-op, and you are investing your resources, your energy, your time, your love, your focus, whatever you want to call that equivalent, because you're looking at the long term, and you're saying the rewards of this, the proof of work that we're going to get from this education, and they're going to be a healthier individual. They're going to be more likely to be successful. They're more likely to be happy. These are the things that I want for my children's future. And that's pretty ubiquitous. I can't imagine you could find parents that say they don't want that for their kids. But that's the payoff. And the relationship between the parents and the child. Huge payoff. Huge payoff. I can't remember if you've talked to Seb Bunny or not, but if you talk to him about the parent-child bond and what's happened with money,
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of finding your blocks and having more Bitcoin on the education side, on the parenting side. It's going to be that relationship, your kids, all those things that I just described. That's how I look at it. But it's hard work. You have to put in the proof of work. If you don't put in the work, then you're not going to get the results. So to me, there's a correlation with, it's not exact, but as a parent, you got to put in your proof of work. And the result is going to be something that may take time to see, but it's worth it.
You mentioned, open resources like Khan Academy, YouTube, now, of course, also AI. This wasn't really there, I think, when you started, or to a lesser degree, definitely. How do you see these tools transform home education? Like, is this I talk to the AI with my son a lot. So if he has questions, I just open up ChatGPT or Perplexity in voice mode, and we just talk to the AI, and we just ask questions. And then, if he has a follow-up question, we just ask it, and we just go down this rabbit hole, right? And I love doing that for myself, but with a 7-year-old, it's even more fun, right? Because he has crazy thoughts. And so awesome. We're doing that a lot. Like, how do you see maybe that combined with kind of like let's call it the awakening, or people that are paying attention to this more and more? Like, I feel just in general, like these three things are converging, like people being more conscious, awakened, Bitcoin, and AI, like it's all kind of like converging in this, I don't know, Renaissance way, I feel. Yeah, like how do you look at that? Just the fact that what was centralized is knowledge, is with AI, it's applied. That's kind of how I view it, right? Like AI helps you to apply the democratized knowledge that is spread on the internet, but you can use AI to actually, do something, like create your own learning path, or now build something with code, right? Like, so the AI is kind of like that productive tool that helps you get there.
Now, I think that's beautiful. I love that you're doing that with your son. I think a couple things on the fiat side. We were talking about the budgeting and the amount per kid and not getting the results. It's almost this too big to succeed type of thing, right? The fiat world is there. What I hear you describing is more along the Jeff Booth technology is deflationary, opposite effect. So if you look at how the technology is accelerating for education, so it's been written language. I'm not a historian, so I'll probably get some of these things wrong, but written language around at least 5,000 years, paper around 2,000 years. I don't know exactly when the first library was. And then you get the printing press, maybe 600 years ago-ish. And then you fast forward to where we are today, and you have the internet. And now the internet unlocks things like Wikipedia and YouTube and Khan Academy. And now you're talking about AI. So as these ideas are feeding other ideas and they're laying on top of each other, you're freeing up more minds to look at this, and you're giving them more tools to build with. So as an educator, it's just that we should have the best education today at the lowest cost than we ever could have in history. You can get access to any subject, anytime, any language, anywhere, right? And it costs you what? Your internet connection? You had to learn how to do a prompt in AI to learn how to use a tool to ask the right questions, but then you found the right resource. So the education quality and efficiency should be the highest it's ever been. We should have more free time and better educated people than ever, and which would accelerate it even further, because now you have more minds that are free to work on what they want to work at and more tools to do it. And that's where I go back to, I don't think you can stop the ideas. I don't think you can stop these ideas of freedom, and I don't think you can stop technology. And in the same reason that is, if you ask me as a Bitcoiner, can you stop Bitcoin? And I would say, no. We can go through the risks, but I don't think you can stop it. And so I think technology is going to continue to do that. It's going to continue to lower the cost. It's going to continue to increase the effectiveness of what's available for you to teach. So you as a parent have more tools than your parents had to do this. And so it's just giving you so much more power to do things. I just think the opportunity is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And those who take the time to try to figure it out, like you're doing, saying, let's go figure this out, and he learns how to use the tools, he'll probably figure out ways of using that you didn't think of. And it won't take him very long.
Probably, yeah.
And then if you teach him how to learn and you let him go, holy crap. Like, it's just, it's a power rule type of thing. It's just unbelievable, the type of power that you can. You talked about reading before. If a child knows how to read, it opens up a whole bunch of other doors.
Yeah.
You start to teach them some of these other technologies that are out there and how to learn, and sky's the limit. There's just the potential is amazing. But that's up to you as a parent. You have to help them, guide them through how to use this tool correctly. You have to be there. You have responsibilities as a parent to guide them. But I actually believe kids want to learn. And this whole idea that people hate to go to school, and it's because the fiat education is going against our natural ways. And what you're describing is in sync with our natural incentives. The parent to teach, the kid wants to learn. I mean, it's just very natural. The technology fits that, and it's only going to keep accelerating because you can't stop it. You can't stop those technologies. You can't stop those inherent types of things. You're not going to stop parents from loving their kids. So, again, you could try to suppress it. You can try to come up with a regulatory moat and say we can't have AI or we can't do this, or you can come up with whatever it is, but I don't think you can contain it. And I think it's wonderful for whoever has. It's almost like a first mover advantage. Whichever parents help their kids adapt to this new world the earliest, their kids are going to get the greatest benefit from it. And obviously, I want everybody to do it, but yeah. I mean, but realistically, that's where we're at. Not everybody, we're early on the adoption curve. So I wish I could get everybody to see that and we'd all instantly jump to the other. But that's not this is more likely going to be a volatile path. There'll be early adopters to it. And I think your kid's going to is going to benefit the most from it because you're taking the time to teach them those tools.
Yeah, I love that, because I think there's a huge similarity with the asymmetric opportunity in Bitcoin, where we talk about a lot about like doing the work. There is an opportunity and it's right in front of you, and you can find all the information freely on the internet. You can even use the technology, Bitcoin itself, to verify everything you read about it, right? And so this opportunity is there. The information is democratized, but you have to do the work. Mm-hmm. And how you are talking about it, also when the education, when you look at a future with AI, if you think about like how centralized systems are updated with the latest technology, right? That they usually lag behind. Like when I studied in university, I read things in books that were maybe 2 years old that weren't even true anymore. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so like the curriculum is behind the reality, basically. And so I love what you just said about, if you adjust, if you just lean into this development, then that is actually an asymmetric opportunity for your child to
100%.
be ahead of the rest. But it's you who has to pay attention and like insert that into their, serving their curiosity and helping them learn. And so I love that there are similarities there. I don't think it has been any different in history with certain new like technological developments or like where society was going. But like in 2025, like all the information is there. So there's a bigger group of people that could potentially harvest that edge or alpha or however you want to call that, right? And I just love that thought because that aligns for me with the idea of just the democratization of information and the accessibility of it, right? And the accessibility to being productive through AI. And so, I think that's a fascinating thought.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and honestly, when you swim with the current like that, it's going to be more natural, right? If you're the incentives of the child, the incentives of the parent, the technology, all these things, when you work in sync with each other, it's going to flow better. It'll feel right as you're going through it. Versus the fiat world, it's working against this. It's just fighting it tooth and nail, and it's going to continue to fight it, and it's going to be rough. You can't stop it. So they're going against the current of where technology is taking us, and these things.
But it's also I think it's also because eventually it's exposed, right? It's the same as with Bitcoin. Like if you adopt Bitcoin and you lower the uncertainty towards your future, you become happier today, right? You become more empowered today. You're more conscious, right? And so that acts as a mirror to other people that are struggling because they haven't figured that out, right? They are still outsourcing a lot of these different responsibilities, like we talked about on different subjects. And so they struggle because they did that and because they didn't do the work yet to get rewarded by adopting a new technology. And I think it's the same as with education. Like if your kids are thriving and they're happy to learn and they feel better about themselves or whatever, that is a mirror to other people. And I just love that thought. I love the thought of Bitcoin being a mirror, but I think with this is the same. And I think, it's just a huge opportunity. It also, maybe that's an interesting thought to ask you. Like, do you think it would cost a lot of money to actually, or a lot of resources, let's call it resources, to move away from that system of outsourcing? I think it's it's with Bitcoin, the self-custody part, for example, is very new to people, and people think that's how do you say, like it's kind of like this hump they need to get over because they're taking responsibility again for something they outsourced for their entire life. So that feels very scary, right? Well, I think people could think the same about this, but what are your thoughts? Like, is it easier than you might think?
We're still early in the Bitcoin journey, and I know that's an overused cliche, so maybe I shouldn't say it that way. But the next group of people who come into Bitcoin, there's going to be more tools for them. So if you, let's say, you're 70 years old and you're worried about passing on your legacy to your family, you understand that you believe in Bitcoin, you did your education on it, but the whole idea of self-custody scares you a bit. Okay, so now you have different players that are, or tools that are created. So now you have things like On-Ramp and Unchained and River that might do certain things, and then you have Sailor coming in with his different types of financial tools that might help people who have the bonds. You have different people developing. So maybe you can't do 100% self-custody on the Bitcoin side, but now you have this selection of tools that you're going to have, different wallets and things. And I think in education, maybe for some people going full tilt self-education or self-custody where you have to do the homeschooling, that might be that might be too much for someone. However, you can still decide. You could pick which private teachers you want to go to. You could pick which co-ops you want to look at working together. If you are in a jurisdiction that doesn't allow you to do that, long term, you could look at moving to a jurisdiction that is more supportive of that. So I think the tools that allow you to modify the education, they're also going to develop. And then you just find the one that's appropriate for your level of self-custody, aversion versus attraction. Like, I don't know where you are on that. If it's too much for you to go all the way, well, then maybe you can just find the tools that help you, do it your way. There's so many different ways. You just need to adapt it to how you do it. For some people, I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that point. For some people, it's going to be scary. No, it's kind of scary for everybody. It's more, you're going to need to come up with a way. It's daunting, and if it's too much, then you can just take a step, and maybe you take a step that's a little bit, and then you decide you want to go further, or maybe that's where you want to stay. But there are a lot of different things that you can apply. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to make the comparison.
No. I think it is an answer to the question. I think it feels daunting. I think daunting is a good word, but I think once you do it, you actually feel that, I'd say, understanding that you are more in control is actually a very empowering feeling, rather than, perhaps going to that 10-minute parent-teacher meeting and just being like, okay, I'm going to wait for them to tell me how my child is doing. I don't know, I'm trying to paint the contrast here, right? But that feels like on same as in Bitcoin, I say, like, with Bitcoin, you're a builder, and with fiat money, you're a consumer, right? So you're waiting for someone else to tell you something. But if you are in control, you know what you're doing. Whatever you are building, builder is a more general term, but just feeling that you're more in control, I think that is already just a great feeling in general. And then the trials along the way and figuring it out feels less daunting over time, because you actually feel like you are in control.
Yeah, I think you're right too. I think as you do it, you'll validate it for yourself. It's like validating a block or something. You try it, you validate it for yourself. Did that go out? Did that achieve what I wanted? Did it achieve more than I wanted? And maybe I'll take the next step. I don't need somebody else to. Or I guess running on your own node would be it. You don't need somebody else to validate it for you.
Yeah.
You can validate. You run your own node, your own parenting node, and you can validate whether it's a good block or not. Like whatever that tool is that that you're looking at.
So, what do you think are going to become more important, or maybe even the most important skills that children or people in general need in an AI-saturated future? Like, what could we teach the children today to help them actually prepare for that?
So that's a great question. So one thing is one we mentioned before, and that is to look at tools. The tools themselves are not good or bad. Just like money is not good or bad. I actually think money is a good thing. It's the whole Ayn Rand money speech type of thing, where it opens up a lot of capability for people who are productive. It could be used in a bad way. Someone could create the CBDC and they can use it in a very bad way. I think AI could be used in very bad ways, like ransom and other types of things. What if it's used to help cure diseases? What if it's used to do something else that is really better for our well-being and human and flourishing? So to teach them that these tools are just how they use them. They're not good or bad by themselves. It's going to be how you use them, and then create a solid ground of, if you don't have character, if you don't have a moral standing, then how you decide to use that is going to influence how you make your decisions on how to apply it. So in the world of AI, that's a pretty powerful tool. And as we get more and more AIs and they can talk to each other and pay each other with sats and things, it's going to continue to accelerate. So the foundation, I think, that would help a student, or not a student, a child as they're growing, as a child is growing, is really building on their character, because otherwise, the ideas of Bitcoin, the ideas of AI, the ideas of all these other things, if they don't have the confidence, if they're not okay with failure and learning from that, if they are trying to get their self-worth from what other people are telling them, through social media or other things they won't be able to use those tools, and the tools will be used against them. If you have strong character and you teach them about in my mind, I would call it like the principles of anti-fragility. You don't have to teach it that way, but if you really teach them how to deal with things, how do you deal with it if someone else doesn't like what you said? So, for example, someone says something nasty about you on social media, and they watch how you react to that. If you define yourself by how someone else has talked about you, that's one message. If you learn from that and you say, I either need to stand up for that, and you're going to talk about courage, you want to say, I'm going to let it brush off because I'm focused on my own things and that person's going to derail you, but you're teaching them how to deal with complexity. You're teaching them how to deal with, teaching them those kind of skills. If that is their foundation, I'm just going to generally call it character, then they will be able to try to figure out these other circumstances that hit them that we can't even imagine what's going to happen to them, and we're probably not going to be there with them when they have to face that. But if you've armed them with that as their foundation, they have the best chance of navigating whatever those future challenges are, to include AI. And so that's where I'm just kind of thinking out loud with you. These are the type of discussions that Tali and I have talked a lot about. It's great that we have these ideas. We want to teach about money or communications or whatever, but or even freedom. If you don't have a foundation, though, if you can't, and that's why it's so important to not let people be indoctrinated in state-controlled type of environments. It's much more difficult to help someone understand later after they've gone through something like that than if you could just start fresh and lay down a strong foundation of who they are. That will help them navigate whatever unknown challenges they have in the future, technologies or otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree. I listened to a recent podcast. I never really listened to Tim Ferriss anymore, but he had a podcast with Chris Sacca. I don't know. Do you know who that is?
Mm-hmm. I don't.
It's like he's a well-known tech investor. And it's super fun. Like he just talks his shit. Like he doesn't care, And they are friends, and so they talk in a great friendly way. And they their last recording was 7 years ago, and they revisit that conversation and see what changed. But they talk about AI a lot, and they talk about how. So Chris said, for example, that he did a commencement speech somewhere, and he basically says you're all fucked, right? Everything that you studied for is going to be gone. I would never send my kid to law school or finance school or whatever. All that stuff is done. It's very interesting. And he said, I don't envy you because the future that you were studying for doesn't really exist anymore. And it's a lot of these Silicon Valley people say we're going to see 100 years of innovation in the coming 5 to 10 years. And so I'm happy that my children are younger and I can kind of prepare for that. But in that conversation, they talked about, okay, so what would you actually, what kind of business would you start? Or what would you let your child study or focus on? And they talked a lot about community and interpersonal skills, public speaking, emotional intelligence. So if technology is commoditized and everyone has access to the same thing, then you can build anything you want. This is kind of my idea now. You can build anything you want, but if you can build anything you want, you have to really figure out what to actually build. And to figure that out, you have to talk to other people. You have to understand what their wants and needs are. that they would want to have solved, right? And therefore you can use that information to figure out, okay, what should I actually build? And then the building part is not the difficult part anymore. Figuring out what to build, like what needs to solve and problems, or needs to serve and problems to solve, is actually becoming more important. And so they talked a lot about that, like just making human connection, basically.
Well, that's beautiful. See, that's what I said. You already have everything you need as a parent, because if you relay that to your kids, like, that's amazing. I think that's a beautiful thought. I actually am going to go try to find that I haven't listened to Sarah's podcast.
I'll send it to you.
So yeah, no. I would appreciate it. I like that. I like where you're going with that, though. I think that's very consistent with what we've been talking about with your character and your foundation. Because if you don't know what you want, and you don't know who you are, if you're defining yourself by how other people certify you and say you should feel this way, or how dare you feel that way, or whatever, if you're not confident in who you are yourself, then it doesn't matter that you have these freedom tools, because you won't know how to use them, you won't know how to apply them. It's a really interesting thought. Yeah.
I think just the analysis paralysis is going to become bigger and bigger. Like, if the choice is infinite, right? Like, if I can do anything I want, then where do I get the motivation to actually do something or decide what I do, right? So I think it's going to go there. And this kind of ties into something I wanted to ask you, but I think you would agree that eventually we both think, Bitcoin is inevitable. But, when we think about, let's say, someone who is born today, or is now like very young, and they're going to be 15 in a few years. Let's say in 10, 15 years, they're going to be 15, right? They're going to grow up in a world where Bitcoin has always existed, where Bitcoin has always been a mirror to, another predatory money system, where AI is like everywhere. You can learn everything, and they know about self-custody of Bitcoin, but also their time, their thoughts, being more conscious. Yeah, what would that world look like when these children are 15 and growing into adulthood? Like, where does that go?
I think it's a double-edged sword. If they understand the things you were just describing, it's going to be an amazing, powerful world. They're going to find purpose. It's going to be just unbelievable. If they don't find that, those same tools will be used against them, and they could fall into the victimhood mentality, or they could be swayed into making decisions that are not in their best interest otherwise. So I think the risks also increase, because there's a lot of, if you don't have that foundation, those same things could take you to the wrong spot too. And it's actually hard to wrap my head around what it would look like in 15 years for someone's born today. What are they gonna experience? I go back to that fourth turning idea. If the fiat train is at some point going to go off the cliff, right? They can't go on forever, so it's going to have to stop somehow. Technology can't stop, so it's going to continue. And so in 15 years, I'm hopeful we're into the next turning, where if you go back a couple hundred years and you say, okay, how did the people then, could they have imagined railroads and electricities and phone and airplanes and all the things that were going to happen, after that? It was beyond what they could have imagined, probably. Or if it would have been science fiction. I think it would be science fiction for us today to understand what that could be. We talk about in movies, hey, you have cure for diseases and people can live forever or something, or you could travel in space, or you could do whatever these other things are. But I think it's going to be so fantastical that I just don't even have I don't even have the right words or vocabulary to describe what it could be when we get to that next turning. And for me, I'll be in a different stage of my life. I think it's a really bright future for them. This is what you hear too, like the population where the birth rates aren't keeping up, and people are depressed about where they are financially or what they think is going to happen in the world, and they're having less kids for whatever reasons. I actually think those that are coming up now, when you come into that next turning, they're going to see the equivalent of what that industrial revolution and other things brought before, on a scale that we just don't even have the words for to see. So kind of jealous. I would love to see that.
I think you'll see something. You'll see something. I think it'll actually. I agree with you. I think it'll be bigger, but it will also go faster, right? So if you see like all these different adoption curves from, electricity, oil, phone, telegram,
TV, yeah,
all that stuff, right? Like everything is going quicker, as in it reaches more people in a shorter time. And I think that is just accelerating, and maybe AI is the last part, and AGI, and then we're at the singularity, and all our heads explode, and we're enlightened. So maybe this is the last. Maybe this is the last one. But I think, just like what I just said, like these Silicon Valley types, they say like 100 years of innovation within 10 years. Like that sounds cool. But I think it's actually pretty shocking. It'll be very shocking if you don't anticipate it, right? I don't think you have to like fully understand it, but it's more like, okay, this is coming. Like everything, like you can take it as a bad thing, like, oh, this heightens my uncertainty towards the future, right? And that could make you anxious now, or a bit depressed or whatever. But yeah, if we have like robots and tech that's like doing all the mundane, stupid stuff for us, and there's like true abundance. What a great idea! I mean, I think that's a great idea. Like, I would love to see that. Like, I hope I get to see that. And I think that's just very. That's a very, I think that's a very positive outlook on the future. It's just very. Doesn't sound boring, in a sense.
It won't be boring. I actually think it's going to be a fight along the way. You're going to have those that don't want to give up what they have.
Yes.
And they're going to fight. Not everyone will be as happy to see it. The expression, it comes even back to, we were talking about just with the education system or the money system or the food system or anything else that you could talk about. And you say, well, it's pretty obvious, like when you actually study these things, that this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this to ourselves? And so we have this human capacity to do really dumb things to ourselves. Right? I mean, some of the wars have been fought and things like that. And so as optimistic as you and I are about that potential, I think human history has shown that between here and that time, there's going to be volatility, and there's going to be things that shock us in a negative way. Ultimately, we'll get to the better spot. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it's a smooth path. I think it's going to. I agree. I don't even know what it is, but just historically, we just seem to. There's going to be a fight, and there's a knowledge-wise, just even in the short term, that the Upton Sinclair quote, where it's hard for a man to understand something that when his job depends on not understanding it, right? I mean, there are certain people whose power depends on them not understanding and not implementing certain things, and so even if something is good for all of us, they're going to look at their own selfish interests, and I just think it's going to be bumpy. I'm very optimistic. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to think that it's going to be a smooth ride from here to there. I think it's going to be more of the up and down type of volatility.
I think I have two thoughts there. I agree, because it's going quicker, the resistance will probably be bigger than all the other technological advancements before. And the resistance is always there, right? Like there are always people that don't want change. I think it's because it takes a long time to see benefits. And I like to be optimistic. Like what I think is that, and again, I like the idea of a mirror, right? If this technology becomes more accessible to more people in a faster time, there will be more people that adopt it quicker, and they will show what the benefit is for their life, right? And that is the mirror, and that can be inviting, or that can be like a blocker for people that increases their resistance, basically. They are already ahead, I'm too late, or whatever. But I think that with AI, the abundance will come, and so it'll actually be so inviting. That's why I think it's more like it's a renaissance thing. Eventually, it'll be so inviting that people will want to change, if that makes sense, right? Like that, like that. It's like, oh, if I just adopt this, like my life is going to be better. And I think why it will go quicker and quicker is because you already see that today. Like I can copy a website and paste the screenshot in some LLM tool, and it rebuilds the website for me, and then I can customize it, right? And like any idea that ever existed will be copied and distributed for free, and anyone can make anything from any information that ever existed. And that's just going faster and faster and faster and faster. And even if you have a new idea, a new product or a service, and you start a company, like it'll be copied, right? Because let's say Uber would start today. Like I could ask ChatGPT now, like act as some sort of business guru, with a 200 plus IQ, and just dissect the Uber business model for me, right? Like if I would want to start an Uber competitor, like how would I do that? Like you have an infinite intelligence machine that can help you dissect any idea, right? And so I think all of that will be copied and democratized. Like all the IP will be gone. Like there is no IP anymore, right? It's like, can you apply it in such a human way that people actually choose you over some sort of generic technological solution? I think that's where it's going. Like there is no middle anymore. And that will invite people to, I think, offer real value. And I think that will just go quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. And so, that's kind of my idea there. Like it will be so obvious to just adopt this that all the resistance will be gone. Basically, it will become so attractive. Yeah,
I have to go faster. I agree with you. The speed. I think. We've already been talking for a bit, so I won't go into it. But I'll just say I agree with you. I think it will go faster and faster. There's a lot of reasons to support your point of view on that.
Yeah, I'm also looking at the time. I wanted to wrap up with two questions. Maybe this one you kind of answered already, but yeah, I just want to ask you, like, what would you say to a parent who feels that the school system, the education system isn't working for their child, but doesn't really know where to start? You mentioned before, just try something. Would that be it, or do you maybe have like another tip to help someone get started?
I would recommend just commit. It's okay that you don't know. You can use. There's a lot of websites. There's organizations. There's AI. There's other groups you can reach out to. But I think step one is make a decision to commit to investigating this. That's where I would start. Then you can follow the don't trust, verify. If you think I'm full of crap and everything I told you is just whatever it is, but invest enough time, commit to educate yourself about education. If you start there, then have the courage to take the next step and try it. So before you try it, I would say just start to learn about it. And if you don't trust me, then verify some of the things that I've said and go and check it out, or go talk to somebody. Go talk to a person who was homeschooled, or go talk to somebody who went through whatever it is that you want to do. To me, it's the commitment. If you as a parent in your heart say, it's worthwhile for me to figure out, invest enough time to figure out what to figure out how to raise my kid, start there. And that's a pretty safe place to start. And then the second step would be have the courage to take a step, even if you don't know how to do it yet. It doesn't matter, you don't know how to teach it, you don't know what the resources are, you don't know fill in the blank, there's something you don't know, but the second step is the courage to try it. So commit and then have the courage. That would be
awesome.
My recommendation.
Yeah. I want to ask you my last question, and I ask everyone the same question, which is at the end. What is a
Yeah, I
core
was like, hey,
belief that you
you
will...
got like the little twinkle in your eye as you asked. It was like, okay, like I got this.
Yeah, because people never prep, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts. The question is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
So this took a little while with this thought. It's taken me a little while to come to this, but the idea that selfishness is actually a virtue, and this the words to describe that were solidified on my Bitcoin journey because someone recommended to me to read a book by that title by Ayn Rand. It's a collection of essays. So in essence, if you pursue, it is a good thing. It is a virtue that you pursue things that make you happy. Okay. Now, this specifically excludes exploiting others, right? If it makes me happy to hurt somebody, then obviously that's not good. But if I want to go out and build games because I can help educate people, or I want to go to homeschooling conferences or whatever, like I don't need somebody else to justify it. And this this idea goes against a lot of the collective ideas that are out there now, where for the good of a group or the good of the state or the good of society or some other type of high entity thing, you should feel guilty about this, or you should act this way, or you shouldn't pursue, whatever it is. And so when you say the words that selfishness is a good thing, that it's a virtue, it's kind of contrary to a lot of popular beliefs. If you just pull it apart a little bit, though, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, look at the incentives of Bitcoin. You have the incentive to do things for yourself that happen to benefit the network and make it stronger, right? That's a good thing. And it's fine. If you want to do, whether it's education or otherwise, as long as you're not exploiting others, then selfishness is actually a good thing. And I think it goes back to, actually, I would tie it back to what you had asked earlier, and I'd answer with, you need to have that foundation, how to deal with AI and other challenges. This goes into helping teach kids as they're growing. Hey, it is good for you to pursue the things that make you happy, the things that you find to be valuable, things that give you purpose. That's good. Don't feel guilty about it because somebody else says you should feel this for this group, or you should feel this for this state, or anything else. So selfishness is a virtue, is something that I feel very passionate about.
I love that you gave this answer. I think like 2 weeks ago or something, I saw someone post an Ayn Rand quote about selfishness, and it really appealed to me. And I actually just used Grok to look up Ayn Rand quotes on selfishness to find it, and I'll read it because I think it's really good. It says, this is from The Virtue of Selfishness, from the book. And she says, selfishness does not mean anything you want to do. It means acting in your own rational self-interest by a code of objective values, which you have chosen and validated by your own mind. And for me, the summary of that is think for yourself. One, right? And there is another quote, which I think is tied to that. That's from Atlas Shrugged. And she said, from The Fountainhead. And she says, to say I love you, one must first know how to say I, the I. The meaning of the I is an independent, self-sufficient entity that does not exist for the sake of another person, right? So if you are not thinking for yourself, if you are not in control of yourself, or at least trying to be, then even saying I love you to someone doesn't mean anything if you are not in control of yourself, because then it has no substance, right? So thanks for sharing that, because that reminded me of that. Yeah.
And by the way, that's an example. That is a great example of the type of thing that you can talk about with your kids that's not being taught. So you go back to reading and writing and arithmetic, whatever, and say, what are we learning? That is an example of building that foundation of character, because if you make that subject part of your curriculum, of the things that you talk about with your kids, think about what the power that you've given them for the future. Like and you want to set them up for success, these ideas. So, no, thanks for looking that up. We got just an example of AI being used real time.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Well, yeah, man. Thanks so much for this fascinating conversation. It's something that's dear to my heart, and I want to thank you for your reflection and your guidance. And I think it was very, very interesting. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. I always learn something, and I look forward to talking to you more about the subject of the parenting as you go through your own journey with that. So
we will, man. We will. Thanks again. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.